The Islamic Golden Age is a critical moment in history, which served as a bright beacon of progress in the Middle Ages, and whose achievements greatly advanced the frontiers of human knowledge. Its long reach still manifests all around us in the form of our numeral system, our words like algebra, algorithm, and almanac, and in the names of the stars in the night sky. Unfortunately, much of this goes unnoticed, as modern perceptions of the Islamic world have greatly stifled interest in its rich history. Today, I wanted to offer viewers a different perspective than the one depicted on 24-hour news broadcasts. In order to do so, we shall provide context for the rise of the Islamic Empire before discussing the Golden Age and its crown jewel, the House of Wisdom in Baghdad.
Before we start, I wanted to thank the channel Al-Hikma for hosting this episode. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Conqueror's Blade. It's a free-to-play PC game with tactical MMO action set in a vast open medieval world. Here, players customize their own powerful warlords with unique weapon classes and special abilities to then command armies of diverse units in order to forge an empire. Fight epic PvP siege battles between teams of 15 players, where attackers unleash devastating siege equipment like rams, towers, and artillery, while defenders respond in kind with their own cunning countermeasures. Season 3, Soldiers of Fortune, has just kicked off to enrich the game with new Battle Pass challenges, new playable weapon classes like the two-handed hammer, and new units like Pavice crossbowmen or Falconetti gunners. Support the channel and play the game today by clicking the link in the description below to get a free 7-day premium account with extra bronze, honor, and XP. See you out there.
Muhammad had first begun to share the revelation of the Quran in 610 AD in his hometown of Mecca, before being forced to flee to Medina in 622. From here, the Prophet played a significant hand in the geopolitics of the region, which helped spread the reach of his message and his followers. Within a decade, Muhammad's forces defeated their local rivals in Mecca and in short order were able to consolidate their power in the Arabian Peninsula. Upon Muhammad's death in 632, control of the emerging empire would pass into the hands of various successors, who held the title of Caliph. The first 4 rulers formed the Rashidun Caliphate. They were deeply impactful and led the charge of the empire out of the Arabian Peninsula and into the wider world of the Mediterranean. Here they struck down the armies of the exhausted Byzantines and Sassanids to take control of the Levant, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Persia, and Anatolia. The Sassanid Empire collapsed completely while the Byzantines managed to retreat and barely hold on. The momentum of the Islamic expansion slowed down in mid-7th century but quickly resumed with the rise of the Umayyad caliphs, who pushed the borders of the empire all the way to the Indus in the east and Iberia in the west. While the edges of the expanding Islamic empire were as bloody and destructive as one might expect from any other rising power at the time, the territory within the empire proved far more peaceful and prosperous. After all, the area that was coming under the control of the caliphs had long been fertile economic, cultural, and scientific ground for many previous rulers. By breaking down existing, fractured realms and reforming them under one domain, an incredible amount of new opportunities opened up. As Dan Carlin might put it, this creative destruction was clearing out the old forest to make room for a new one to rise from its ashes. One of the important features of the Islamic conquests was that their rapid expansion had necessitated a policy of leniency when it came to incorporating the vast domains of the caliphs, which were filled with all kinds of people from varying ethnicities and religions. Islamic rule was therefore not a case of convert or die at sword point. It instead resembled something more along the lines of Roman tolerance and fair governing. Islam still played a large role in the empire, but was envisioned as something uniquely for the Arabs, who existed as a sort of military caste above their subjects. In fact, the ruling class would put in place many measures to set Muslim Arabs apart as their own preferred group. Yet, even this group did not isolate itself entirely. As outsiders, they were keenly aware that they had much to learn and adopted a surprising degree of openness and flexibility. One of the greatest manifestations of this mindset was the Arabic translation movement. Gaining real momentum in the 7th century under the Umayyads, the movement was a widespread attempt to translate Greek, Roman, Persian, Indian, Chinese, and other written stores of knowledge into Arabic. This frenzied activity saw countless ancient texts brought together for the first time in history. Their contents not merely translated, but compared, discussed, critiqued, and disseminated. These scholarly efforts were critical in protecting previous works that might have been lost to the ages and produced much that was new. The Umayyads focused their attention on many practical subjects, commissioning works on medicine, mathematics, and astronomy. However, it would be the succeeding Abbasids who greatly increased the scope and scale of these endeavors, delving deeper into the sciences whilst also exploring the diverse fields of art and philosophy. The rule of this third caliphate would bring about the golden age of Islam and birth the House of Wisdom. The Abbasids emerged as victors from one of the many revolts against the ruling Umayyads in the mid-8th century. The unrest had many contributing factors, but was largely driven by a desire to overthrow the current system, which almost exclusively favored the minority group of Muslim Arabs. Some examples of common grievances included the monopolization of both government and military bureaucracies, as well as discriminatory regulations on marriage, housing, and taxation. Where other revolts were defeated, the Abbasids found stunning success through careful planning, propaganda, secrecy, and decisive action. In fact, theirs would prove to be one of the most successful revolutions of the era. The impact of the uprising was significant, in that it restructured the power balance of the empire. No longer were the Muslim Arabs the sole masters of the realm. Now the fruits of the caliphate were shared more equitably across the empire by a broader coalition of newly enfranchised subjects. Thanks to this easing of social restrictions, Islam was transformed from an insular religion for the Arabs to a universal world religion. This in turn led to a new openness to ideas from across the empire, regardless of their geographic origin. As had occurred previously following the conquests of Alexander the Great, a huge cultural and scientific exchange was unleashed across the East and the West. This was the Islamic Golden Age. To commemorate their new world order, the Abbasids founded the brand new capital of Baghdad. Commissioned on 30th of July 762 by the Caliph Al-Mansur, it was located just 30 kilometers from the ancient Persian capital of Ctesiphon, and commanded strategic control of both the surrounding fertile river plain and trade routes. Its placement was a reflection of the more eastern focus of the Abbasids, who increasingly adopt all things Persian. Built in just 4 years, Baghdad was a marvel of construction and surely deserves its very own video. Suffice to say, it proved to be the beating heart of the Islamic Empire and one of the jewels of the ancient world, which rivaled the greatest cities of Europe. Under Al-Mansur's careful direction, Baghdad experienced a meteoric rise and quickly became a bustling cosmopolitan city. This activity attracted some of the brightest minds of the Middle Ages and ignited the translation movement, which had previously begun under the Umayyads and was just now adopting papermaking from the Chinese. To quote Professor Ayman Geran, "With talented Arabs, Jews, Christians, and other specialists from the Middle East and beyond all contributing, the quantity and the variety of works translated during this period was staggering. This included books on algebra, geometry, metaphysics, logic, and endless treatises on astronomy and astrology." It's said that on one occasion, when the Caliph Al-Mamun sent a mission to bring texts back from Khorasan or northern Persia, the camel caravan that marched into Baghdad consisted of 100 animals just to carry the manuscripts. This must have been a truly magnificent sight to behold, especially given the contrast in Europe where centers of learning were being abandoned or pillaged. Creative energy soon bubbled up, not just in Baghdad, but across the whole empire. On the primary focal points were the schools of higher education known as madrasas. These had first started as mosques that taught religious law and practical skills, but which were soon swept up in the Enlightenment fervor of the era. Within a century, funding from private or public sources, such as waqfs, allowed them to quickly grow in scope and scale. In a short matter of time, virtually all major towns had at least one madrasa, while larger cities might have had hundreds of them alongside other educational centers such as libraries. Functioning as early proto-universities, these madrasas taught religious subjects in addition to the rational sciences, which included subjects as varied as mathematics, astronomy, astrology, geography, alchemy, philosophy, and occultism, depending on the curriculum of the specific institution in question. Such was the demand for these institutions that the scholars and translators could now make a reliable living, and academic life was seen as a symbol of status. Knowledge itself became so highly prized that the acquisition of ancient texts even came to be considered valuable wartime plunder, comparable to gold. For instance, one of the peace treaties signed between the Abbasids and the Byzantines stipulated that Ptolemy's Almagest must be handed over as a part of the exchange. The greater ramifications of this society-wide embrace of learning was that the Caliphate of the Islamic Golden Age boasted the highest literacy rate of the Middle Ages. While the madrasa system did a great job educating the public, the more serious scientific advances were carried out by scholars working within major urban centers under the patronage of Abbasid nobles. It is therefore in the capital of Baghdad, under the direct sponsorship of the caliphs, that the greatest hub of learning would emerge. This beacon of the Islamic Golden Age would be known as Al-Hikma, the House of Wisdom. The House of Wisdom had its origins in the founding of Baghdad. During construction, the Caliph Al-Mansur added a library to his palace, providing economic and political support to the scholars who worked there. Successive caliphs would maintain and expand this institution. For instance, the 5th Abbasid ruler, Harun al-Rashid, is noted for adding his own storehouse of the books of wisdom. However, it would be the 7th caliph, Al-Mamun, who truly left his mark. He ordered the construction of new wings, dedicated to each branch of science in addition to building brand new study centers and even a state-of-the-art observatory in 829. Quite the scholar himself, the caliph lavished such support and attention on the center of learning that today he is credited as the founder of the famed House of Wisdom. So, what was the House of Wisdom? Basically, it was a well-funded, centralized hub for learning. However, I'll note that the exact nature of that hub is subject to debate. Very little physical evidence remains today, and we are left guessing as to whether the House of Wisdom was a single entity or a web of institutions spread across Baghdad. Regardless of the distinction, it is clear that the scholarly community greatly benefited from the synergistic environment which evolved into something comparable to that of our own university towns. So, who worked at the House of Wisdom? Well, for starters, there would have been a large body of scholars, made up of various specialists and their students. This group would in turn have its own administrators and support staff, which included scribes, translators, archivists, guards, chefs, and sweepers. These positions would have been filled by men and women of many ethnicities and faiths from across the empire and beyond. Persians featured prominently in their ranks, and even Christians occupied important roles in the House of Wisdom. Walking through the halls, you would have heard a huge number of different languages, including Arabic, Farsi, Aramaic, Hebrew, Syriac, Greek, and Latin. It was truly a remarkably inclusive endeavor. What did they accomplish? One of the main activities taking place in the House of Wisdom was the translation of works into Arabic, such as writings of Greek philosophers, Roman doctors, Persian astronomers, and Indian mathematicians. This was no simple matter. Just translating the text, word for word, requires an expertise in the subject matter to properly interpret the material. Such was the value of this work that under the Caliph Al-Mamun, it was reported that experts could expect to receive payment equivalent to their book's weight in gold. However, things did not stop there. Once in Arabic, countless scholars would pore over the material, comparing it with other works, debating its merits amongst their peers, and injecting their own learned opinion. In this way, hundreds of years of commentaries and revisions would be added to the translated text. On top of this, new research and experimentation was taking place in centers such as the Great Observatory of Baghdad. The result was that while the light of civilization may have dimmed in the West with the fall of the Roman Empire, it roared with life in the East and led mankind into the future. Now, let's take a closer look at some of those incredible achievements coming out of the House of Wisdom and the Islamic Golden Age. The first leader of the House of Wisdom was the Christian Hunayn ibn Ishaq. Dubbed as the Sheikh of the translators, he reproduced 116 works, including the entire collection of Greek medical books and great texts by Apollonius, Archimedes, Euclid, and Ptolemy. As an excellent physician and surgeon, he also wrote some of his own material, such as the 10 Treatises of Ophthalmology, which was the first textbook of its kind to explain the anatomy of the eye, along with its diseases, symptoms, and treatments in a systemic and detailed way. Al-Khwarizmi, another leader of the House of Wisdom, produced important works in mathematics, astronomy, and geography. Known as the father of algebra, his treatise entitled The Compendious Book on Calculations by Completion and Balancing would be used as the principal mathematics textbook in Europe until the 16th century. His second most influential work on arithmetic, using Hindu-Arabic numerals, revolutionized the manipulation of numbers and gave rise to the term algorithm. In addition, he contributed significantly to the development of trigonometry and geography, building upon world maps by calculating the precise latitudes of various cities. Al-Kindi, remembered as the father of Arab philosophy, delved deep into the writings of Hellenistic thinkers and successfully incorporated Aristotelian and Neoplatonist thought into an Islamic philosophical framework. He is also noted for his 230 works in many other subjects, such as astronomy, optics, medicine, chemistry, and mathematics. However, one of his most interesting and influential books would be entitled The Manuscript on Deciphering Cryptographic Messages, which earned him recognition as one of the fathers of cryptography. Ibn Sina, known to the West as Avicenna, was another titan of his time. With over 450 published works covering topics such as astronomy, alchemy, geography, geology, psychology, theology, logic, mathematics, physics, and poetry. His most famous book is The Canon of Medicine, a medical encyclopedia which became a standard text at many medieval universities for nearly 700 years. There are countless more such figures we could list off. Al-Zahrawi, the father of surgery, Thabit ibn Qura, the founder of statistics, Ismail al-Jazari, who engineered intricate water pumps and automated clocks, Al-Biruni, who calculated the radius of the earth to within several kilometers, and many more, not to even mention the many fantastic artists, poets, musicians, and architects of the period. The end of the Islamic Golden Age. Sadly, after nearly 500 years, the Islamic Golden Age would draw to a close. Many scholars place this date in 1258, with the Mongol sack of Baghdad, which destroyed the city along with the House of Wisdom. While this undeniably traumatic event greatly set back the Islamic world, much of the era's momentum continued to propel it forward. However, in the long run, these sorts of attacks did begin to take their toll. Muslim leaders increasingly found themselves in troubled economic and political waters, which made it difficult to maintain the thriving environment of the Golden Age. Turning more to military matters and wariness of the outside influence led to a decline in the openness of sciences, and a turn inwards to more close-minded dogmatism. I hope you've enjoyed this video and the amazing history of the Islamic world that so often goes unappreciated in the modern media. For more great content, definitely check out the channel Al-Muqaddimah, which does an amazing job bringing this history to life. See you next time. A huge thanks is owed to our supporters on Patreon and the many talented researchers, writers, and artists who made this video possible. Please consider contributing to fund future content. If you found this topic interesting, check out these related videos about our fascinating past. Be sure to like and subscribe for more history, and check out our description for ways to support the channel. Thank you for watching.